Hello and welcome to Tools in the Shed, a podcast powered by CarsGuide, ready to rip into car stuff that has caught our eye this week. I'm CarsGuide Deputy Editor James, and with me is Editor Mal. And for the first time, a person many of you will be familiar with, the one and only Dave Morley.
One and only?
Yeah.
My mum will be pleased.
This week, we're looking at new cars making their mark and proving there's still room to grow in the hyper-competitive Aussie market. We'll cover off 3 recent entrants to the CarsGuide garage, and we'll check in on an even richer tech billionaire who likes playing with fire in this week's MuskWatch. So stay with us. But first of all, we're going to look at a story that created quite a lot of buzz in our news section through the week, authored by our own Stephen Otley. And it was looking at new cars that have made their mark in the Australian new car market, despite the fact that we've all been thinking how much more competitive, how many more, models can start diving in. He's identified several that have done just that and carved out a pretty strong niche for themselves. And we should talk about that. We've had a lot of arrivals this year, obviously, from Hiluxes to Defenders to you name it. But there seemed to be this set that has really got people's interest. And the first one is the Kia Seltos. Mal, I know we've had a lot of toing and froing around recommending Seltos for particular customers. What's your take on
toing?
Yeah. What's your take on this car so far in the Aussie market?
If we're going model by model or the whole story?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Seltos was clearly a gaping hole in the Kia lineup. They had the Sportage as their smallest for a long time, and pretty much everyone else, including Toyota, had managed to launch a small SUV beforehand. So it's a big answer to an even bigger question. But the thing is, and this applies to all these models in this list, that it's quite an achievement to achieve sales success early on with new nameplates these days. And it requires significant marketing input. And we can see from our own traffic that if a new model's launched, consumer interest starts off very slow and only sort of builds as time goes on. Whereas, they launch a new RAV4, there's all the people already looking at the old RAV4 that sort of discover the new one and just sort of continues over. So, I don't know. Does that answer your question, James?
I think
it's a good car. It's a very good car.
In terms of the name, I've always thought it sounded like an antacid tablet. That if you're suffering from an upset stomach, just take a Kia Seltos.
Well, they're about to launch the Stonic beneath it. Now that sounds a little even more like it.
That sounds more like an ointment.
Stonic.
I think that's some kind of cream or an ointment, actually. But
I think it'll be an ointment for their even smaller SUV lineup. Anyway,
Dave, have you had an opportunity to steer a Seltos at this point?
No, I haven't. But I'm reminded of my uncle who used to sit on a special medical board, but now he just uses the ointment when you talk about the Stonic. Look, it's going to be a good car. There's no two ways about that. Those guys don't make cars anymore, certainly not in the last couple of decades. It's amazing how many of those South Korean brands I now recommend to people or models that I now recommend to people, because you just can't go past the warranty. For people who are attracted to that sort of car, and my neighbour's a classic example.
Right.
They've now got 2 Kias in the driveway because they're a no brain damage car. They're not into their cars, but they need transport. The thing had everything they needed as a mode of transport, and it had a 7-year warranty. How do you go past that?
Yeah, I think also the level of safety in this car is pretty impressive in its part of the market, and its size. Yeah, Mel, you're right. It was a gaping hole for some time, but it really plugged that very effectively.
I like the way it's another sort of player in this smaller end, but still is shaped like an SUV and delivers the practicality benefits that a lot of people find appealing in an SUV. It's not another, like the Kona is Hyundai's small SUV. Oh, actually, next to the Venue, it's their not so quite small SUV. But the Kona is not bad for passenger space, but the boot space is kind of abbreviated by that tight rear end. And the Seltos just goes, let's just make an SUV with a big boot.
And it started to give the ASX a bit of a hard time, which is overdue. The ASX has had such an open playing field for so long.
They struck it lucky with the shape, didn't they? We've said it many times, but by God, they struck it lucky a decade ago.
Yeah.
The size and shape of that car.
I think we've identified that some of the base grades, there's a lot of the hard kind of plastic in the thing, but that goes with the territory. You're in that part of the market. But look, another one that, for what it's worth,
I think the cheapest version is still lacking some safety stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good call. These two. So
sorry to interrupt.
That's all right. Another one that, for what it's worth, surprised me is the CX-30 Mazda, because I thought Mazda had really kind of got its different models meshing together quite nicely. Then cars like the CX-8 and the CX-30 arrived to create even more choice in there. But lo and behold, the CX-30 has proved to be extremely popular.
Yeah, and I think that they're wise to fill these gaps and sort of create a complete spectrum of options, because we know that most buyers are still in that stage of going, my next car is going to be an SUV. No one thinks my next car is going to be a mid-size SUV or a large SUV. They just want an SUV, and then when they start looking, they work out what size is right for them.
Yeah.
And the CX-3 was so much smaller than the CX-5, so a CX-30 makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And they might think Mazda SUV. Anyway,
Ollie's identified that it's sitting just behind the Kia, 7,000 sales, 9.2% market share. So that's a pretty good effort. And I suppose while we've watched Mazda 3 soften off, a long-term favourite, it's cars like the CX-30 that have started to join the CX-5 and this migration over to yet more SUVs. All right. Now, another one. Here we are. We're in Korea yet again. Hyundai Venue. While the Kona is the second best-selling small SUV, it's taken a while for people to warm up to the Venue, but it's still found more than 3,000 buyers who like that affordability factor. It's given Hyundai something to play with at that more budget-focused end of the SUV market.
Sorry. I was just going to say, I think that the price is the key with that thing. There's so many people who want an SUV but can't afford a bigger one. That thing, it seems to me on paper to offer what it needs to. It's going to fill the bill. It's going to do what it says on the box, and you can sort of presume that with that brand. Yeah. And yet it's very accessible from a price point of view. So that's obviously going to make a lot of difference to a lot of people who possibly wouldn't even be looking for a new car, other than the fact that the neighbours have got an SUV. We better get an SUV.
Yeah,
exactly. And look, just purely on a subjective level, I find it an attractive design. It's appealing. I think it would have a lot of showroom appeal. When you walk in, you think that's a snazzy looking little, city-sized yet could cope with a small family type SUV. I think it's got that going for us too.
And when it launched, the fact that it replaced the Accent as the entry model in the Hyundai range, I think a lot of us went, oh, hang on, is that the right idea? But subsequent to that, all the traditional light hatchbacks like the Swift and the Yaris and the Mazda 2 have become much more expensive. And I think you can get a Kona cheaper than you can pretty much any of those hatches these days. So given it represents the size and shape of vehicle that people aspire to, it makes a lot of sense.
Very good. Now,
that's an interesting point. What you're talking about, where the little SUV is replacing the conventional hatch. Like the only Fiesta you can buy now, and we're going to talk about this later, is the ST. There's no other Fiestas. You then need to go to a Ford SUV if that's what you want. If you want a little hatchback, you're in the wrong showroom. The Yaris, for volumes are falling on that. However, the Yaris Cross promises to be quite a good seller. Certainly on current projections. So, that whole embracing of the SUV thing just is not stopping. It's just such a juggernaut, isn't it?
Yeah, true. Ford will give you a Puma instead of a regular Fiesta.
They'll give you one. That is quite a deal, Mel. They'll give you one. I suppose whenever you darken a showroom door, they're all kind of shaking in their boots anyway, and just hand the car over.
Thank you for addressing that misstep there, James. I'm not going to argue with you.
But what I was going to say, we've got a couple more to cover. Stephen Otley also called out the Volkswagen T-Cross. So all of a sudden it's T-Rock, T-Cross. There's a lot of T's swinging. around Volkswagen. And when you think about its more traditional lineup like Polo and Golf and Passat, here once again come these SUVs to satisfy that demand. And Volkswagen has been a little short in that department as well, and they've come back roaring with a vengeance, yeah?
Similarly with Skoda, although they're not covered in the story, with the Karoq, with still finding its feet, and now the Kamiq, which seems to be a really good option in this lower end of the SUV class.
Yes, yeah. Look, the other thing I was going to say too, you mentioned the Yaris and then Yaris Cross. I, not for the first time, quite obviously, felt a bit stupid in kind of scratching my head about the price of the Yaris when it landed, because it had jumped up so much in terms of its entry pricing. But then, yeah, of course, as soon as the Yaris Cross arrived, it starts to make a little more sense in terms of a whole of market approach. But the T-Cross, I think, again, shows how superficial I am, but I think it's a good looking car, again, in this part of the market. And it takes on, you know, things like the CX-3, and so far it's got, what's Dave's reckoned, almost 2,000 sales. It only hit showrooms in May. So it's got 8.9% market share, which bodes pretty well for its chances next year. And
Volkswagen's, sorry, you go.
I was just going to say, I think you're selling yourself a bit short, calling yourself, criticizing the fact that you think it looks good as a reason for buying. I mean, that's a major reason for buying it. I don't see that as being shallow at all. And I should know, I'm deeply shallow. I think that that is such an important thing, and that current generation of Volkswagen does really look sharp.
Yeah, it does. It does. Now,
well packaged.
We're going to step up for our final vehicle to discuss in this little segment to a giant scale. This is immense, this car, and I do recall driving it when it had been first launched and thinking, oh, how on earth can you justify this much metal and rubber and glass, and then driving it for a week and thinking, oh, but it's so nice to drive. Like it really is a very pleasant thing to get around in, but it's enormous. And that's the BMW X7. So it's the upper large SUV. You've got pricing beginning at about 130K, and it's comparing with things like a GLS Merc, probably a Range Rover, the LX Lexus, Audi Q8, all of those big Bertha, typically Euro or Japanese in the Lexus's case, SUVs. But it is one of those things where you look at it dispassionately and go, that's obscene, you know. How can you, and then you drive it and go, God, it is really nice to get around in.
And they've clearly put a lot of effort into it with the third row accommodation, and it's quite a luxurious experience, even on massive wheels, which often is not the case.
Yeah, it was also the start of the humongous grille trend. It was the one that really started to get serious in terms of making a huge grille in the nose of a BMW.
Okay, a couple of things. That grille is ridiculous. I'm sorry. No engine needs that much air. And if it does, it should be a jet.
And it's probably shuttered most of the time anyway.
Yeah, it is.
I haven't driven the X7, but look, I don't think I'd ever be able to get around the fact that I was feeling like I was delivering bodies to a morgue.
Yes, you think there should be some curtains across the rear windows.
It's criminally ugly, seriously.
Yeah.
And that's my personal view, but I couldn't buy it purely on that. And I guess I'm coming back to that previous point. I just couldn't do it because it doesn't look like something I want to be associated with.
But I suppose each of those cars just do go to that point that says just when you think the house is full, there's room for 5 or 6 more. That we're continually divvying up this market into ever smaller niches, and these are good examples of that.
Well, that's true. And I was just about to say, here we are talking about the nichification of the car market yet again, and more so this time. It's an ongoing thing. We've been talking about this for years now, and it hasn't stopped. But on one level, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, you guys have been into an optometrist. Now, 2 walls of the entire shop will be covered in different glasses. They all do fundamentally the same thing, depending on what lens you put in them. But, look at the choice. Have you been into a fishing shop lately?
No.
of lures, brightly coloured plastic lures. Some of them will have one pink dot to differentiate it from the one next to
Another
it.
one.
There's hundreds of them. There is no limit to the choices people will accept, you know?
Yes. I suppose
this story is all about cars that are actually achieving sales success, though. So it's proving us all wrong.
Yeah. And I think one thing to consider is when you're talking about a car, it's a large, elaborate, heavily engineered object. And for a car manufacturer to make the decision to put a new model into market with everything that goes with it, pre and post sale in terms of the parts, the service training, all of that, it's a big investment, and you've got to be sure that it's going to pay off as a strategy, you know. All right, now we will leave it there, and what we would love people to do is give us your thoughts on each of those cars that Steve Otley's called out. Let us know if you think they're worthy and whether you've been considering them, whether you may have bought one. That'd be interesting. But we'll move on to cars that we have in fact been driving in the recent past. And Dave, I would like to start with you, if that's okay. And you've nominated, a favourite amongst us. Please fill us in on what you have been steering lately.
Well, because of COVID, and I'm in Victoria, we haven't been able to get out a whole lot. And a lot of the car dealerships have been closed, and the people that prepare test cars haven't been operating. So I haven't driven a lot of cars in the last few months, but I did manage to snare a week in a Fiesta ST. And wow, what a great little car. I mean, it's the antithesis of what we've just been talking about, where things are getting jacked up and plastic wheel arch flares and, 10 grand on the price. This thing is all about going quickly in a small package, but it's just such an entertaining car too. It's such a charming little car. I mean, I've always said that when something is more than the sum of its parts, that's my definition of art there.
Yep.
I'm not sure that artists would agree with me, but they can get a real job. I really love that little car. I particularly like it because they've stayed true to the ethos of the original one, which remains one of my all-time favourite cars of the last 10 years.
I don't know about you, Dave, but I operate on a threshold, and I think the Fiesta ST is the tipping point in terms of if you want a sporty, rewarding, involving drive, you don't have to really go further than a Fiesta ST. Anything more you're spending in terms of money, or any more horsepower that you're putting through the wheels down to the road, particularly the urban environment we live in, the Fiesta ST is a car you can have fun in from one set of traffic lights to the next. It's just a really nice, fun car to drive.
And now it's a 5-door hatch, so you can live with it.
Exactly. So emotion takes over even more once you get beyond the Fiesta ST, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I think my metric for this comes down to could a good driver in a Fiesta ST beat a bad driver in a Lamborghini Aventador?
Yes.
Okay.
Good idea.
And they can.
Yeah.
So that, I think, once you get to that level of performance, do you need much more? The other thing, of course, in Australia, because we've been brainwashed by the Americans for so long about what is and what isn't a performance car. I mean, let's not forget the Americans believe a Corvette is a sports car. We've missed the boat.
Shout out to all our American viewers and listeners.
We've missed the boat for so long on hot hatches. Europe's known about it, but it's been a bit of a tightly held secret here. But now people are getting the hang of it. The cars are becoming much more accessible financially.
Yeah,
they're coming in greater numbers.
Because we were just checking it. I mean, we're at low 30K, like $32,000 for an ST.
Exactly. So that car for that money, that amount of performance for that money, you just can't buy more fun for 30 grand. I don't think.
Yeah. And the other thing is, like, we're all accustomed to the second iteration of a magical car being ruined, and they've done anything but with this one.
The difficult second album.
Yeah, that's
exactly.
right.
Yeah, well, you're right. This one is a very good follow-up. However, I don't know. There's something about it's a slightly more pure experience. It's splitting hairs, but I probably was a little more enamored of its predecessor than this one, but it's a very close run thing.
I tend to agree. I think, intellectually, I know that the 3-cylinder has its merits, and it does. I mean, as a motorcycle rider, I really understand 3-cylinder engines and I love them. However, I think for a little hatch, just the 4 cylinders just seems to sit a bit better for me. It was a 3-door, not a 5-door. A car that size, I'm not going to put people in the back. You know, the only thing I'm going to put in the back seat of one of those is my helmet and race boots. You know, on my way to the track. Yeah. So I think I like the Recaros in the first one a little bit better.
The manual shift was just so sweet.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I just felt like I was a little bit more in touch with it. You know.
Yep.
The only thing is you need to do something with the wheels and the paint to make it look something other than Barbie's first hot hatch. You know, I mean, they did look a little, yeah. You know, for a bloke who looks like me,
Yeah. Ken.
You know,
Ken. I mean, that's your nickname around the place.
Better not.
Well, that's good.
I mean, I reckon I will go and buy a Series 1 Fiesta ST in a few years' time. I will own one.
Yeah, good one. Now, thank you very much for that, Dave. And Mal, we will move on to your good self.
Yes.
You have been in a tough vehicle. That's what Land Rover would have us believe. Tell us about your thoughts on the Defender.
Yeah, so I think it launched several months ago, but I've only finally just had a chance to experience it for myself. We had Crafty at the launch, when was it? Ages ago. Anyway, Nadal's actually conducted a test of the Defender, and I sort of borrowed it for a little bit when she was finished with it. And so we had the P400 SE, which is the petrol straight 6 model with the top drivetrain, but SE being the middle trim level. And even still, it's $102,000 for options,
right?
And on-road costs. So not very cheap. So this is the 110 as well, so the long wheelbase, not the 90 short wheelbase that's coming.
Yep.
I think the car has a good sense of theatre about it, both inside and out. They've put a lot of work in the design, even though it's really just a Discovery under the skin. But I think it feels more Land Rover than a Discovery. I think Discovery sort of evolved into more of a Range Rover worthy.
Oh, yes.
Product.
Was I calling it Discovery? I meant to say Defender. Did I get that?
No,
right?
it is Defender, but under the
Very
skin,
good.
it's a Discovery.
No, and I mean, is it too luxurious? Is it too kind of cityfied and I mean, it's a bit of a chalk and cheese transition, isn't it? Because the last one was not rudimentary, but it was pretty straightforward. This one's a lot more luxo.
Yeah, but imagine if they launched anything closer to what the original was in terms of being rudimentary. Like they crucify it. I mean, look at the Wrangler. The Wrangler is so true to what a Wrangler is.
Right.
It's like they've really just from the word go made the best Wrangler they can. But in deciding to give it a folding windscreen and removable doors, it can never compete with other cars on a safety front. And with the solid front axle, which is just so romantic. It will never compete with a decent independent front axle in terms of just general dynamics and livability, even though it's really good for what it is.
It's a great point you make about safety because that really was a large part of the death knell of the prior Defender was safety. Trying to make that thing comply with current regulations. It was a bridge too far.
That and the fact that it was fundamentally a handmade car, and the labour input costs were just horrendous. They could never modify it for proper series production because it was this old dunger that they'd been building in a back shed with two blokes with flat caps and funny accents.
Exactly. But
it's amazing how much they had modernised it, but they couldn't do it to the same level as a 70 Series Land Cruiser.
Now you've got to go off and buy your Ineos, isn't it? Isn't that what it's called?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
Or the Bowler.
Or the Bowler. Well, talk about hand built. I mean, they certainly are.
Anyway, so the car I don't think is perfect. I think the interior design's really impressive and really specific to the Defender. But annoyingly, have you driven it, Dave? Yet?
No, I haven't, mate. No.
Okay, sorry. I don't think you have either, James.
I have not.
Anyway, well, for your benefit, they've moved the drive mode buttons up onto the dash next to the selector, which thankfully is a proper selector, not a rotary dial. But they're all backlit only. They're not actually labelled. So in direct sunlight, they just look like a sea of blank buttons. You can't tell what you're pushing, which is fine normally. But in direct sunlight, it's a bit of a compromise. What else? it feels a bit bizarre that it's a petrol engine under such a big SUV these days, but, you know, with diesel being a bit on the nose and ultimately not quite as clean as petrol, it makes sense. And look, you know, the Ingenium Straight 6 manages a 9.9 litre official combined fuel figure, which is not bad for such a huge, boxy vehicle. I didn't get the chance to run my own numbers, and I look forward to, but, you know, it's a smooth engine and it's got plenty of poke. But I think the engine calibration is quite heavily calibrated towards delivering that on paper efficiency. It's quite doughy off from idle, even in S mode. And that sort of adds to the sense of bulkiness to the car. It is a big car, but it sort of feels a bit lumbering. I hope that's fixed when in the off-road modes, but I didn't get the chance to take it off-road. But if you're poodling around in a city, it's sort of it's a bit lumbering, even though it's the petrol. The other thing that some people might be surprised by is the rear storage area is quite small, and I think that's largely because of the short rear overhang, which is great for clearance and great for making it look like a Defender. But it's a big vehicle that the cargo space isn't much more than what you'd expect in, say, like a RAV4. And look, you know, it's still plenty of room, but it will be limiting if you are looking to take it on extended touring trips through the outback, etc. But yeah, as I said, I think overall it's what it needs to be as a 2020 Defender, and you know, I think they'll sell more cars as a result.
Yeah, I think it looks ultra cool. I really love what they've done with the design. Was it that concept was called DC 100 or something? You know, best part of 10 years ago, and that's where it was heading, and it hasn't gone a million miles away from that. I think it looks really slick.
Yeah.
All right.
It's funny.
Sorry, Dave. Go ahead.
No, sorry, mate. Mel, it's a shame you didn't drive it off-road. I'd love to know what it's like because, as you can see from my background photo, I tend to use off-road four-wheel drives as, you know, nature intended. And one of the things, has it got a two-speed transfer case? So it's got low ratio gears?
Yes. Yep. And I don't mean to shortchange you or the listeners, but you'll find that our very own Marcus Kraft has put it through its paces big time through the Blue Mountains on its launch. So they certainly got it dirty there.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that worried me about the Disco was you could get it in two variants, one which had a low range transfer case and one which had a single speed transfer case. And the presumption was that you could still take the lesser one off road. And the way it got around not having low ratio gears was by having a reasonably low first gear in a multi-speed gearbox. And then it slipped the torque converter to provide a little bit more latitude for the engine to build some boost. Now, I don't know how much you know about automatic gearboxes, but if you talk to a bloke who does, he'll tell you that the first thing you want to do is reduce heat. You can never overcool an automatic transmission.
Yeah.
By slipping the torque converter, you instantly start to create heat. Now, that might be fine for climbing a mossy hill in Scotland once a day, but they're feeling that crossing dune after dune over the Simpson or up Goog's track in South Australia or something like that, you're going to get that gearbox pretty damn hot. And I just wonder how fit for purpose some of that technology is.
Yeah. I was going to say, you know, I know all about automatics. Nobody knows more about automatics than me. I know that D means drive, for example. If you want to ask me anything about automatic transmissions, I'm open.
I thought it was D for Gataway.
Hey, Dave, it strikes me that with the Disco, they've just sampled the spec of that 8-speed auto that's fitted to the all-wheel drive Amarok. You know how it sort of had the same, you know, overcoming the range,
that's right.
Really short first. Anyway, but it just doesn't add up on paper, does it? Unless it's got two radiators.
Well, maybe it does. I don't know. I haven't driven one over enough sand dunes to destroy it yet, but I got a feeling that on a 40-degree ambient day, towing a camper trailer, things are going to get awful hot if you start using that facility. I always like to see a two-speed transfer case because, you know, but I'm also of the generation that thinks a real four-wheel drive has a minimum of 2 gear sticks. So, you know.
Yeah, very good. Exactly.
But Dave, as we can see in the background, you're clearly someone who uses these things properly in remote areas.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of people wanting to do the same.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Particularly this year.
Yeah, funny that. Well, I mean, that car in the background, that is actually my own car. And it's a non-turbo diesel. So it's
Mechanical injected.
It's slower than a long weekend in Canberra. But the only electronics in that vehicle are in the stereo and the CB. Everything is absolutely analog, mechanical. It's got a snorkel. It will run underwater. I know this. So for what I do, you know, I don't even want carpet, let alone fuel injection. Yeah. So I get that. You know, I'm in the 1 percentile at the other end of things, but you know, there is still a market for those cars, I think, and we're moving increasingly away from them. I mean, to call something a Defender that is as plush as the new Defender, to me, but I need to drive it, so you know, I'll take that on notice. Yeah,
good call. All right, I'll chip in with a car that it does have carpets, I must say. It only has the one gear shift. I was slumming it this week in the Rolls-Royce Ghost. So that's an all new car. And according to Rolls-Royce, the only thing that carry over from the last Ghost is the Spirit of Ecstasy emblem up on the nose and the umbrellas that slide into the doors. Everything else is new. The car's wider. It's all-wheel drive. It's four-wheel steer. It's a 6 3/4 litre twin turbo V12, 8-speed auto. So way back in its history, that V12 would have some BMW DNA in there, but Rolls-Royce assures us it now has a Rolls-Royce part number. 420 kilowatts, 850 Newton meters at 1600 RPM. And this thing, it will accelerate from 0 to 100 in 4.8 seconds. Despite the fact that it's 2.5 tons. It is quite the car. And it was a really bizarre circumstance in that it was a press product launch. Here you are, experience the car for an afternoon. Goodbye, thank you. So 4 of us, 4 different Ghosts were driving on the Old Pacific Highway in New South Wales. And when I was the 4th car, you could see the ones coming the other way and their look on their face was quite something to behold, because seeing one Rolls-Royce Ghost is a bit of an experience and seeing 4 in a row is just ridiculous. The thing about it, it is unbelievable in terms of its ride comfort. It is everything that you would expect of that car. It's active suspension. They call it, it's like flight on land. And I've got to say, it is. You are looking at the road in front of you and going, this is a dead ordinary road, and it feels billiard table smooth. It is uncanny, really fantastic. And it's on big 21s with huge Pirelli P0s on it at the same time. It's restrained, it's quiet. It is proper luxury, like no mucking around, chrome over brass type luxury, you know.
Big thick carpet too, isn't it?
It's all that stuff
that
you would expect. It has a thing called effortless doors. So it's got electronic assistance for you opening and shutting the doors, which are clamshell kind of doors. And it just is what you would expect. And it's a car they say you can be driven in, or you might choose to drive yourself. It's kind of flip of a coin, but it is a big beast. You know, as I say, it's 2.5 tons. It's got a 13-meter turning circle. It's 5.5 meters long. The steering, but what they've done with the steering wheel, and we'll have some pictures up for people watching on YouTube, it really is an echo of wheels of Rolls-Royce past. It's beautiful the way they've done it, but the steering itself is quite numb. You know, you are not connected with what's going on with this car. It's not that type of vehicle. It's more the type of vehicle where there are 850 LEDs in the fascia, giving you this sparkling star kind of effect, that kind of stuff. Stars and shooting stars in the roof. We were told that a couple of blokes were sent around the world to measure raindrops so that they could have the water running off the side rain channels effectively. All of that palaver. So it's $628,000 as a starting point to get your backside into one of these, whether it's in the front or the back. And then the sky's the limit in terms of, you know, which kind of emu feathers you want to have on the headrests and all that kind of stuff. It was quite an experience to drive, but it delivers exactly what you would expect it to deliver.
I've got a question.
Tow rating.
Hey, good point.
Like, what did you say they called it? Flying on the ground flying or something?
Flight on land.
Flight on land. Does that mean the food's crap and your luggage goes missing?
That's right. And if you get the centre seat, that is the short straw. But
is it that guy either side of you?
there's actually a piece of concrete roadway coming off, travelling north off the Sydney Harbour Bridge. That is a great test of suspension because it is so terrible. It's just almost like cobblestones. It's so badly, misaligned and angled and what have you. And a car that I've gone across that where it felt smooth was a Bentley Mulsanne. I had the opportunity to drive that once overnight, and it was this same thing. Unbelievable. I'm looking at this piece of rubbish road and I'm not feeling it. This car was like that, even a little bit better. It was impossible.
21s.
Impossible. And on 21s. And big fat Pirellis on them as well.
Has it got the cameras that face forward that read the road and then tell us? So it's actually preemptive active suspension. Truly,
all of that. Yeah, it is.
That's a really interesting technology. And what I like about what you're telling me is that this is a car that it's trading on its heritage, but it's brought the right bits of that heritage into the 21st century. Whereas I don't necessarily agree with a Land Rover Defender with plush trim. I do get a Rolls-Royce that runs on orphans' tears and destroys peasants. I get it. What could be better?
In the back, you've got everything you'd expect. Fold down the door. Oh, there's a couple of little champagne flutes there, and all that is there in abundance. And a fold down desk, wood trimmed. All of that stuff. It's quite.
Is there a spot for your flagon to go?
No, I doubt it. I doubt it.
It's an optional extra for sure.
Yeah, a goon receptacle. Could be.
Yeah, a goon rack.
If you
a flag or a flagon you're asking about?
Flagon.
Oh, right. Yeah, flag.
Goon. If you want that, Dave, it can be done in kangaroo hide. If you'd like that.
Well, actually, funny you should talk about that. I went to a Bentley. I went to a Bentley launch some years ago, and they were telling us about their individualization program, and they wouldn't say no. They wouldn't agree to do it, but they wouldn't say no when I asked that if you had a dead pet, could you have that turned into a steering wheel cover or an armrest trim? Yeah. They didn't. They wouldn't say no. Yeah. So I hold out hope.
It gets into very delicate territory there, because when you do talk about the people that talk about that, that do the personalisation, some of the requests they use words to the effect of, we try to encourage them in a different direction and alter and offer different options, such that the car that they want to build doesn't get built.
You've got it wrong when they want all the money up front, because they know that if you don't take it away, they're going to be stuck with it. They also well aware of the fact that once you've bought it, you're going to be buried in it, because you'll never sell it.
We don't want that. We don't want that sucker in stock. That's right. You're gonna have to pay for this up front too. True.
If you want leopard print finish, make sure you wrap it post purchase rather than making it paint so that's reversible.
And look, bring the leopard in with you when you've got your deposit, because we need that as well. So that's good. Thank you, guys. What we'll move on to is a bit of feedback from last week. Last week, we were primarily looking at the emergence of Hyundai's N-line Sonata. So the rise and rise of Hyundai N, be it in that more hardcore N version or an N-line. And we had plenty of feedback, and our old mate, Peter Panousis, said that he was bloody impressed, not just impressed, bloody impressed with what Hyundai's been doing lately with the N and the N-line variants. And he really gets the fact that N is more hardcore. He says that's not for him. He doesn't turn the music up to 11. That's not his go. He's more N-line. Good performance without the hard edges, more comfy, less raucous, less in your face. And our review, when it arrives, could propel the Sonata to the top of his shopping list. Now, for more recent people who have joined us on the podcast, Peter's shopping list has been building for at least the last 2 years. He joined us on a road test to celebrate our 100th episode of the podcast, and he was compiling his list then. That was a year or so ago. So Peter's list, one day he'll buy a car, but he'll keep us informed in the interim. Now, General Damage, and good to have you with us, sir. General Damage says, the story had said coming for Stinger, and he says, but it's front-wheel drive. Come on, man, a phrase that he borrowed from Joe Biden. And that is a sticking point. I mean, the Stinger has got to have an advantage for traditional performance enthusiasts with its front-engine rear-drive setup, and a Sonata is going to struggle trying to win those over, don't you think, guys?
Well, again, because we've now embraced the hot hatch concept, people are of the opinion, or are forming the opinion, that front-wheel drive can be really good.
Yep.
If you drive a really functional, well-sorted front-wheel drive car, there's no real trade-off. So maybe that's I should know, but maybe that's old thinking.
Very good. Now, what we can say further to that front-wheel drive thought, Jim Danick says, can't wait for your test drive report on the Sonata N-Line, as not sure how well it will corner with all that power and no ELSD. So that's a fair point, that it's getting up there in terms of power, and to put that effectively onto the ground through the front treads, you probably do need some kind of limited slip diff. So it will be interesting to drive for sure, Jim. And Birdie, our old mate Birdie, proud Victorian, says the arse end of Sonatas have always been very ordinary. This N keeps that trend alive. So his view is that it's not winning on the design stakes, and he is supported in no small measure by De Kook, who says he dislikes the Stinger for its non-existent practicality. There you go, his words, not mine. But says Sonata.
I disagree.
Okay, go Mel. Go ahead.
I lived with one for 3 months and carried a family of fours, everything in that car. And it's
right.
It's
was it your family? Was it
really,
your family or someone else's family?
Occasionally I borrowed one, but generally my family.
You borrowed a you have
the reality is there's
anyway.
Not that much difference in practical cargo space to a Sportage.
Okay.
And the back seat is relatively narrow for a big car, and the access height is quite low. But for kids, given I'm short and loading them in, it's fine. It's really quite practical.
Okay, that's good. That's good feedback. Well, anyway, De Kook goes on to say that Sonata doesn't even compare to the great design of the Stinger. It looks like Hyundai's moved from boring design to over design. Too much going on, and not in a good way for his taste. And I think a lot of people agree with him. It is quite a busy look for that car. Yeah,
and look, the sedans of this size are still very popular in the US, but in Australia, they're swimming against the tide.
Yeah.
In that, cars like the Sonata and, even the Camry and the Mazda 6 sell to a particular age group. And it's quite risky to go controversial with the styling for people of that age group. So we'll see how they go. It's interesting to see things changing, and adding a performance mod to the lineup is interesting.
Well, I think actually the only Sonata we're going to get is this N-Line, unless I'm
right. Okay,
correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's right. But anyway, Owen Morby says it would be nice if it had a manual gearbox, and yes, it would. And it puts me in mind of Car and Driver's long-running campaign called Save the Manuals, which has been going for some time, and I'm a full-on supporter. But manual gearboxes are becoming increasingly problematic in the new car market. People just seemingly don't want them or can't drive them.
Getting the fuel economy number 2.
Yes,
is not as easy. So
precisely.
There goes your average just because we offer a manual.
Yeah, I'm clearly quite out of the loop with the Sonata issue. But has anyone investigated whether the New South Wales Police are going to be lining up for the Sonata N-Line? Because they've certainly bought a lot of the current one.
Mal, you couldn't have come up with a better segue if you'd come in riding on one. That is perfect, because our last comment is from TGV. TGV, the very fast train, says, among other things, New South Wales Police will love, so that's New South Wales in Australia, will love the Sonata N-Line. Lots of SSs and XR6 turbos about to be decommissioned. So he is on the same thought line as you there, Mel.
And there's lots of current 2-litre turbo Sonatas.
Yeah. So they've already got the deal going with Hyundai. Maybe it's a short step to take up this N-Line for some highway patrol type work. All right. Well, speaking of people who should be pulled over by the highway patrol, it is time for MuskWatch. Cool. And this week we'll kick it off. Sure enough, Elon has been back on the Twitters, and he said, as a teaser, Tesla holiday software release is 2 fire emoji. So fire. It's going to be whatever the software update is going to be, fire. And Adam Pope, various people were coming back with what they might like to see as this software update. Alarmingly, quite a lot of people wanted full self-driving. But anyway, hopefully just a few get that in beta mode. Adam Pope wanted an AC mod that smells like gravy. I thought that was a very interesting one. And Chokra Rajasthani took all that on board and said, I'll comment later. I'm in the hospital. My cousin brother swallowed a 16 gigabyte memory card and he's singing all the songs on it. We just pray he doesn't reach the video folder. So that's the kind of commentary that Elon is getting on his Twitter post these days. And in a similar vein, and bear in mind, this man is going to turn 50 in 2021. He came up with a tweet that said, chicken or egg, case closed. And his closing argument was a graphic that actually had various animals, egg-laying animals that had evolved and lived well before the chicken. So he's saying the egg definitely came before the chicken, case closed. But Mark, one of the commenters, said, except for this. And he quoted a story where a Sri Lankan hen has given birth to a chick without an egg, in a new twist on the age-old question of whether the chicken or egg came first. Instead of passing out of the hen's body and being incubated outside, the egg was incubated in the hen for 21 days and then hatched inside. So there you go, no egg at all. And just to close off with the Tesla share price, it has bumped up appreciably, $486.64 a share. It was $413 last week. It hit a high of $495 yesterday. And a publication called Opto Trading Intelligence is saying Tesla's share price continues to shock investors. And there are a couple of things behind that. It's finally cracked it for a spot on the S&P 500. So that brings with it its own kind of imprimatur and substantiates the stock as a valid choice in the eyes of investors. And Morgan Stanley has gone all in on its recommendation on Tesla shares. And Opto called out that we are now at 427.7% increase year on year on the share price. And good old Elon is not far from Bill Gates for the second richest person on the planet. He's beyond Zuckerberg and gunning for Bill Gates. So God knows where you'll go from here. But that is the story. And with that,
is there any connection between...
Yes, Dave.
So I was just wondering if there's any connection between, Tesla fortunes with SpaceX. They finally got the thing to the space station without turning the astronauts into cosmic coleslaw. There's now a government contract ongoing. It's got to help. Everyone knows it's the same lunatic, don't they?
It's all coming up roses for him. I mean, he was quite transparent in saying that it was only I want to say a couple of years ago where he was on the brink of financial collapse with Tesla. And I'm sure that would have punched a big hole in his ambitions with SpaceX. So like any, courageous entrepreneur, he's really pushed things and walked a very fine line financially. And it seems to be paying off for him now. Yeah. All right. Well, look, I think with that, we have reached the finish line. And I want to say thanks, Mal.
Thank you, James.
And thank you, Dave.
My pleasure.
And thanks to our humbly confident production guru, digital wizard, and innovation rock star, Mr. Pritchard, for his sleight of hand in bringing this show together. Today, he's wearing a t-shirt saying, "People reckon I'm too patronizing. That means I treat them like they're really stupid." Bike shorts with the label "Warning may contain nuts," and Godzilla shoes. Let us know your thoughts. You can find CarsGuide on Facebook and Instagram, or email us at comments@carsguide.com.au. If you're an Apple podcast listener, please rate and review us. Remember, you can also watch us on YouTube. And if you're already a subscriber, if you're already a viewer, make sure you subscribe to the CarsGuide YouTube channel so you can stay on top of all our latest reviews. Please do that. But before we go, did you hear that sadly, Willie Nelson was hit by a car this week? He's okay. He was playing on the road again. Thanks, Mal.
No.
Thanks very much.